To begin our dissection of the frog, we will first look at its external anatomy. The first organ we see is the thin, scaleless skin covering the external anatomy. Next, we see paired forelimbs and paired hind limbs, each limb composed of 4 toes. At the posterior end of the trunk of the animal, between the hind limbs, is located a large vent, which is the opening into the cloaca. Looking at the anterior end of the frog body, we first see conspicuous paired tympanic membranes that extend to the posterior edge of the head region. Just anterior to the tympanic membrane, we see one of 2 paired bulging and large eyes. Each is protected by upper and lower eyelids. Just anterior to the eyes, we see centrally placed dorsal external nares. These nares are small and extend anteriorly, opening into the animal's wide mouth. Its fleshy lips are located in a terminal position. We are now going to explore the anatomy within the oral cavity and pharynx of the frog. To do so, we first need to cut into the corners of the mouth so that the area within can be fully opened and examined. Now that we have exposed the oral cavity, we can begin to identify the structures within from this ventral view. First, we see the uniformly shaped conical teeth located in rows. Lateral and slightly posterior to the last teeth are the prominent paired internal nares, the internal opening of the nasal passage. We can also see the conspicuous openings to the eustachian tubes. On the floor of the oral cavity is the very muscular tongue, attached to the anterior portion of the lower oral cavity, which extends from the lips to the equally wide pharynx, the space seen here. Behind the tongue, on the floor of the pharynx, is a raised area with a vertical slit, which is the glottis, the opening to the larynx and trachea. Posterior to the glottis is the esophagus. We can see its opening appearing as a horizontal slit in the back of the oral cavity. To expose the internal anatomy within the trunk of the frog, we will make a midline incision with a pair of scissors. The incision will begin in the center of the abdominal region and cut to the transverse fold of skin separating the trunk and hind quarters. Now that we have exposed the muscle underneath the thin skin, we will cut through the muscle to expose the organs within the abdominal cavity, paying careful attention to keep our scissors pointed up as to not damage the underlying viscera. Now that we have exposed the abdominal cavity, we will explore the organs within. First, note the prominent lobed liver, which is the largest organ of the body. Just dorsal to the right lobe of the liver, we can see a thin-walled gallbladder embedded on its lower surface. The gallbladder empties into the elongate bile duct. A short esophagus lies just dorsal to the base of the liver. That esophagus leads to a larger, tubular stomach. The stomach is J-shaped, curving towards the animal's right side. A dark-colored spleen is located within the mesentery, suspending the stomach and small intestine. The stomach continues and ends posteriorly in a constriction, which is called the pylorus. That is where the small intestine begins. Within the first loop of the small intestine, we see a slender S-shaped pancreas lying parallel to that first loop and under the stomach. Beneath the fat on the animal's right side, the small intestine continues and is coiled. It then enlarges in diameter and forms the large intestine, which empties its contents to the outside through the cloaca and vent. In this view, we can also see the bilobed urinary bladder attached to the ventral surface of the cloaca. We will investigate the urinary bladder more in our discussion of the urogenital system. Here, we will investigate the urogenital system of the frog. The urogenital system consists of paired kidneys. The left kidney is seen here. In the male, the posterior portion of the kidney produces urine. That urine is then sent to the urinary duct, where it is transported to the cloaca. Off of the cloaca, we see the urinary bladder, where the urine can back up into. The reproductive system of the male consists of paired testes. The left testis is seen here and produces sperm. That sperm travels through the anterior portion of the kidney and also enters the urinary duct and passes through a seminal vesicle, which is not visible here, and into the cloaca, where it then exits through the vent. Here we can see the reproductive system of the female frog. Eggs are produced in the paired ovaries. Here we can see the right ovary. Eggs then are released from the ovary and enter into the oviduct. Eggs are passed through the oviduct and transported to the cloaca, where they are released through the vent. Because the heart of the frog is located very far anteriorly, we need to extend the cut into the neck region to fully expose the heart. We are carefully cutting the skin of the animal. With the heart fully exposed, we now need to remove the prominent pericardial membrane that surrounds the heart. Now that we have removed the pericardium from the heart, we can see the delicate wall of the triangular sinus venosus that lies dorsal to the heart. The sinus venosus receives deoxygenated blood from the liver, the paired anterior vena cava, and the posterior vena cava. On the anterior side of the heart, we see a left and right atrium. While the right atrium receives deoxygenated blood from the sinus venosus, the left atrium receives oxygenated blood from the pulmonary veins. Each atrium empty into the single ventricle. Blood then travels from the single ventricle into the conus arteriosus. From the conus arteriosus, blood then travels into two heavily walled arterial vessels, the truncus arteriosus. The truncus arteriosus then divides into the pulmonary arteries and the left and right aortae. The pulmonary arteries carry blood to the left and right lungs, while the aortae loop dorsally and posteriorly until they join with each other to form a single dorsal aorta, seen in the lower abdominal cavity.